David always thought his biggest problem was fixing computer bugs at work. He spent his days writing code for a small tech company in California, living in a tiny apartment with stacks of science books everywhere. Most people his age were out, partying on weekends, but David preferred something different. He loved looking at stars. Every Friday night, David packed his old telescope and sleeping bag into his beat-up Honda. He would drive 2 hours into the desert, far away from city lights, just to see the night sky clearly. His friends thought he was weird, but David didn't care. There was something peaceful about being alone under billions of stars. This particular Friday in September felt different, though. For the past 3 weeks, David had been tracking something strange in the sky. It wasn't a plane or a satellite. He knew what those looked like. This light moved in patterns that made no sense. It would appear in one spot, disappear, then show up somewhere completely different minutes later. David had filled half his notebook with drawings and times, trying to figure out what this mysterious light could be. His co-workers laughed when he mentioned it during lunch breaks. Probably just a weather balloon, they said. But David knew better. Weather balloons don't zigzag across the sky like they're playing games. That Friday evening, David reached his favorite camping spot near Mount Wilson. It was a small clearing surrounded by Joshua trees, about an hour's hike from the nearest road. He had discovered this place 2 years ago and never seen another person there. Perfect for stargazing without any interruptions. As the sun went down, David set up his equipment with practiced ease. His telescope wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was reliable. He had bought it used from a pawn shop when he first got interested in astronomy. The tripod was wobbly and the lens had a tiny scratch, but it had shown him amazing things over the years. The temperature dropped quickly once darkness arrived. David pulled on his worn jacket and made some instant coffee on his small camp stove. The familiar routine always calmed his nerves after stressful weeks at work. Out here, there were no deadlines, no angry clients, no broken software to fix. Just him and the infinite universe above. Around midnight, David started his real observations. He pointed his telescope toward the constellation, where he had seen the strange light before. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. He spotted Jupiter's moons, traced the outline of distant galaxies, and made notes in his journal like always. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., something changed. The mysterious light appeared again, but this time, it was much brighter. David quickly adjusted his telescope's focus, his heart beating faster with excitement. Through the lens, he could see the light wasn't just a point anymore. It had shape and structure, like some kind of craft moving through space. David grabbed his binoculars for a wider view. What he saw made his hands shake. The object was definitely not natural. It had smooth, curved surfaces that reflected starlight in impossible ways. And it was getting bigger, which meant it was coming closer to Earth. Much closer. David watched in amazement as the craft continued its descent. It moved without any sound, gliding through the atmosphere like it was swimming through water instead of flying through air. The object seemed to shimmer and change colors as it moved, cycling through silver, blue, and golden hues. Part of David's brain was screaming at him to run. This was clearly something beyond human technology, something that shouldn't exist according to everything he knew about physics and engineering, but another part of him was fascinated. This was the discovery of a lifetime, the kind of thing that would change history forever. The craft was heading directly toward his location. David stood frozen beside his telescope, watching as the impossible vehicle approached the clearing where he was camping. It was enormous up close, at least the size of a city bus, but it moved with the grace of a bird. The surface looked like liquid metal, constantly shifting and flowing even though it maintained its overall shape. As the craft hovered about 50 feet above the ground, David noticed there were no engines, no exhaust, no spinning rotors. It simply floated in the air as if gravity was just a suggestion rather than a law of physics. The only sound was a soft humming, like the vibration of a tuning fork. David's notebook fell from his trembling hands as the craft slowly descended into the clearing. Part of him wanted to grab his phone and record everything, but he couldn't. Move. This moment felt too important, too sacred somehow, to view through a camera screen. The craft touched down with barely a whisper, settling onto the desert floor like it weighed nothing at all. Up close, David could see that its surface wasn't solid metal, but something that looked almost alive. Patterns of light moved beneath the surface like glowing veins, pulsing in rhythms that reminded him of a heartbeat. For several minutes, nothing happened. David stood perfectly still, afraid that any movement might cause the craft to disappear like a mirage. His scientific mind was racing with questions. Where did it come from? How did it work? Who or what was inside? Then, without any sound or warning, a section of the craft's wall simply melted away like ice in hot water. An opening appeared, revealing a soft blue glow from within. David's throat went dry as he realized someone was about to come out. This was the moment that would change everything he thought he knew about the universe and his place in it. David's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. The blue glow from inside the craft grew brighter, and he could see movement in the shadows. Every instinct told him to run, to grab his gear and sprint back to his car as fast as possible. But his feet felt glued to the ground. A figure appeared in the opening. At first, David thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The being that stepped out didn't look like the classic gray aliens from movies or TV shows. This was something completely different. Something beautiful and terrifying at the same time. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with long limbs that moved with incredible grace. Her skin had a pale, pearl-like quality that seemed to glow softly in the moonlight. It wasn't exactly white or silver, but something in between that shifted slightly as she moved. Her face was elegant, with features that were almost human but not quite. Her eyes were the most striking thing about her, large, luminous, and filled with an intelligence that made David feel very small. She wore what looked like a flowing robe made of the same material as her ship. It moved around her like liquid, starlight, never quite touching the ground. As she stepped onto the desert sand, David noticed she made no footprints, as if she weighed nothing at all. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. David felt like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move or speak. The being's large eyes studied him carefully, and he had the strange feeling she was reading him somehow, looking deeper than just his physical appearance. Then something incredible happened. Recognition flashed across her face like someone who had just found something they'd been searching for their entire life. Her expression changed from curiosity to what David could only describe as shock, then amazement, and finally something that looked almost like joy. What happened next made David question everything he thought he knew about reality. The being slowly lowered herself to one knee, her head bowed toward him in a gesture of deep respect. It was the kind of bow David had only seen in historical movies, the way people used to greet kings and queens centuries ago. But this felt different, more profound somehow, like she was honoring something sacred. David stood there with his mouth hanging open, completely confused. Why was this obviously advanced being bowing to him? He was just a regular guy who fixed computers for a living. He wore old jeans and a jacket with holes in the elbows. His hair was messy from the desert wind, and he probably smelled like instant coffee and campfire smoke. Then she spoke, and David's world changed forever. The words didn't come through his ears but appeared directly in his mind, as clear as if someone was speaking right next to him. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes mixed with flowing water, and it carried emotions that human language couldn't express. "Heir of the Starborn," she said, and David felt the weight of those words settle into his soul. "We have searched for your bloodline across the cosmos for 3,000 of your years." David's legs finally gave out, and he sat down hard on the desert ground. His telescope toppled over, but he didn't notice. His mind was spinning with questions that all seemed impossible to ask. Air, bloodline, 3,000 years, none of this made any sense. The being raised her head and looked at him with those incredible eyes. Now that she was kneeling, they were almost at the same height, and David could see compassion in her gaze, along with the respect. "You do not understand," she continued, her mental voice gentle but filled with certainty. "Your ancestors called us the Skywalkers, the Star People. We have been watching, waiting, hoping that the ancient prophecy would prove true." David finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I think you've got the wrong person. I'm nobody special. I'm just a programmer who likes looking at stars." The being smiled, and it was like watching sunrise over the ocean. "Your humility proves your worth, young heir, but you are far from nobody. The energy that flows through your veins sings of royal blood, of a union between worlds that was thought lost to time." She gestured toward his fallen notebook, which had opened to a page covered with his recent observations and sketches. "Tell me, have you always been drawn to the stars? Have you ever felt like you were searching for something among them? Something you could never name?" David looked at his notebook, then back at her. The honest answer was yes. For as long as he could. Remember, he had felt a strange pull toward the night sky. Other kids played video games or sports, but David spent hours on his roof with binoculars, feeling like he was looking for something specific without knowing what it was. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice getting stronger. "You're talking about things that sound like fairy tales, prophecies and bloodlines and royal heirs. That stuff doesn't happen to real people." The being stood gracefully and extended her hand toward her ship. "Come with me, heir of two worlds. Let me show you truths that your people have forgotten, knowledge that was hidden in your very DNA, waiting for the right moment to awaken." David stared at her outstretched hand. It looked human enough, though her fingers were longer and more slender than his. Her skin had that same pearl-like glow, and he could see tiny patterns of light moving beneath the surface like living tattoos. Taking that hand would mean stepping into the unknown, leaving behind everything familiar and safe. But as David looked into her eyes, he realized that his ordinary life had just ended whether he liked it or not. The moment this being recognized something in him, his world had changed forever. Besides, he had always been curious about the stars. Now the stars had come to him. David took her hand and immediately felt a warm, tingling sensation run up his arm. Her skin was smooth and warm, more like touching silk than flesh. As she gently pulled him toward the ship, he noticed that walking beside her felt strangely natural, like he had done this before in some half-remembered dream. The inside of the craft was nothing like David had imagined. Instead of cold metal corridors and blinking lights, he found himself in what looked like a living room made of crystal and starlight. The walls curved smoothly around them, glowing with soft colors that shifted from blue to purple to gold. The floor felt solid under his feet, but seemed to ripple with energy patterns that moved like slow waves. "Please, sit," the being said, gesturing to what looked like a chair that grew out of the floor as he approached. "I know this is overwhelming for your kind. We will take things slowly." David sank into the chair, which molded itself perfectly to his body like it was reading his shape. "Your kind," he repeated. "What exactly are you? And who are you?" She settled gracefully onto another chair that formed beside his. "I am Zara, Queen of the Zephyrian people. We are what your ancient stories called the Skywalkers, though that name has been lost to your history books." As she spoke, the walls around them began to shimmer and change. Images appeared in the air like holograms, showing scenes that took David's breath away. He saw vast cities floating among the clouds, beings like Zara tending to gardens that grew in zero gravity, and ships like this one traveling between distant stars. We come from a system you call Alpha Centauri, Zara continued. But long ago, we lived much closer to your world. We were explorers then, scientists who studied different forms of life across the galaxy. The images changed, showing Earth as it looked thousands of years ago. David saw primitive human settlements, but also structures that seemed far too advanced for the time period. Pyramids and stone circles that aligned perfectly with the stars, built with technology that shouldn't have existed. Your people were young then, Zara explained, but they showed great promise. Some of our scientists stayed to help your civilization develop. They shared knowledge carefully, teaching astronomy and mathematics, showing your ancestors how to work with metal and stone. David watched in amazement as the scenes played out around him. He saw beings like Zara working alongside ancient humans, building monuments and teaching them to read the stars. But what struck him most was how naturally the two species seemed to work together, like they belonged side by side. One of our princes, Altair, fell in love with a human woman named Luna, Zara continued, and the images focused on two figures standing together under a night sky. The male looked like Zara's people, tall and graceful with that same pearl-like skin. The woman was clearly human, with dark hair and gentle eyes. This was forbidden by our laws, Zara said softly. Our people were not supposed to form permanent bonds with other species. But love, as you humans say, finds a way. David watched as the story unfolded. He saw Altair giving up his advanced technology, his royal status, even his connection to his own people, all to stay with Luna. The other, Zephyrians, eventually left Earth, but Altair remained, living as a human among humans. They had children, Zara continued, and those children carried both human creativity and Zephyrian abilities in their blood. The genetic combination was unique, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. The images showed generations, passing with Altair and Luna's descendants spreading across the world. Most of them lived normal human lives, never knowing about their special heritage. But occasionally, one would be born with unusual gifts. The ability to understand complex patterns, to sense energy fields, or to feel drawn to the stars in ways they couldn't explain. Wait a minute, David interrupted, his mind racing. Are you saying I'm descended from this prince and the human woman? Zara nodded and new images appeared around them. David saw his own family tree stretching back through time, connecting him to that ancient union. He recognized some faces from old family photos, including his grandmother, who had always claimed she could predict the weather by watching the stars. The bloodline was strong in your grandmother, Zara confirmed, somehow reading his thoughts. She passed the gift to your father, who passed it to you. But in you, the dormant abilities have begun to awaken. She gestured, and David's notebook appeared floating in the air between them. The pages flipped open to show his recent sketches and observations. But now David could see things he had missed before. Hidden among his drawings of star patterns were symbols he didn't remember making, mathematical equations that looked nothing like human mathematics. You have been unconsciously writing in our ancient language, Zara explained. Your human mind doesn't recognize it, but your Zephyrian heritage does. These symbols describe dimensional travel, energy manipulation, and stellar navigation techniques that even we had forgotten. David stared at his own handwriting with new eyes. The random doodles he had made during boring meetings at work suddenly looked like complex scientific formulas. The star patterns he had been tracking weren't random at all. They formed a map showing the location of hidden Zephyrian outposts throughout the galaxy. This is insane, David whispered. You're telling me I'm part alien royalty and I've been doing alien science without knowing it? Zara smiled that sunrise smile again. You are the heir we have been searching for, David. The prophecy spoke of one who would bridge our two peoples, someone with the wisdom of humans and the abilities of Zephyrians. We believed the bloodline was lost forever, but your awakening has called to us across the stars. More images appeared, but these ones made David's blood run cold. He saw dark shapes moving between stars, consuming entire planets and leaving nothing but empty space behind. He saw Zephyrian cities under attack, their beautiful crystal structures cracking and falling. "Our people are in danger," Zara said, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. "An ancient enemy has returned, beings we call the Void Wraiths. They feed on life energy itself, turning thriving worlds into lifeless rocks. Our traditional defenses cannot stop them." David felt a chill run down his spine. "What does this have to do with me?" "The prophecy says that only the hybrid heir can develop new ways to fight the Void Wraiths," Zara explained. "Your human intuition combined with Zephyrian abilities could create solutions that neither species could achieve alone." David looked around at the incredible technology surrounding him, then back at his simple notebook filled with unconscious alien writing. The weight of what Zara was asking began to settle on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. "You want me to help save your entire civilization," he said slowly. "But I'm just one person. I don't know anything about fighting cosmic monsters or saving worlds." Zara reached out and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Every great journey begins with a single step. Heir of two worlds. And you are not as powerless as you believe." The next 3 weeks changed David's life completely. Every night after work, he would drive to different remote locations where Zara would meet him. She taught him things that seemed impossible, yet somehow felt natural, like remembering skills he had forgotten long ago. At first, the lessons were simple. Zara showed him how to feel energy fields around living things. David thought she was crazy until he held his hands near a cactus and actually sensed the slow, steady pulse of its life force. When he tried the same thing with rocks, he felt nothing. But with plants and animals, there was always that warm, tingling sensation. "Your human emotions make you more sensitive than pure Zephyrians," Zara explained during one of their desert meetings. "We think with logic and patterns. You feel with your heart. That combination is incredibly powerful." By the second week, David was doing things that should have been impossible. He learned to see energy patterns that were invisible to normal human eyes. When Zara held up her hand, David could see streams of light flowing through her body like glowing rivers. When he looked at himself in the ship's mirror-like walls, he was amazed to see similar patterns flowing through his own body, though they were fainter and moved differently. The hardest part wasn't learning the abilities. It was keeping everything secret from his normal life. David still had to go to work every day, still had to act like a regular computer programmer who spent his weekends camping. His co-workers noticed he seemed distracted, but they just assumed he was working on some personal project. If only they knew. During the 3rd week, Zara began showing him the real scope of the problem they were facing. She took him inside her ship's command center, where holographic displays showed star maps covering thousands of light years. Red zones marked areas where the Void Wraiths had already struck. "They move like a plague," Zara explained, pointing to the spreading red areas. "Each world they consume makes them stronger. They take the life energy and use it to create more of themselves." David studied the maps with growing horror. Entire solar systems had gone dark. Billions of lives had been snuffed out like candles in the wind, and the red zones were getting bigger, spreading toward populated areas of the galaxy. "How long do we have?" David asked. "Our scientists estimate 6 months before they reach the core worlds where most of our people live," Zara replied. "Maybe less if they find a way to travel faster through dimensional space." That night, David barely slept. He lay in his apartment bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about billions of innocent people depending on him to find a solution. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. He was just one guy from California. How could he possibly make a difference against cosmic monsters? But when he met Zara the next evening, something had changed in him. The fear was still there, but underneath it was a growing determination. Maybe he couldn't save everyone, but he had to try. "I want to learn faster," David told her. "Teach me everything you can." Zara smiled with approval. "Now you begin to sound like the heir we have been waiting for." The advanced lessons were intense. Zara taught David how to manipulate energy fields directly, not just sense them. He learned to create shields of solid light, to bend space around small objects, and most importantly, to see through dimensional barriers that kept the void wraiths hidden from normal detection. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night in October. David was practicing energy manipulation when he accidentally created something neither he nor Zara had expected. Instead of forming a simple light shield, his human emotions mixed with Zephyrian abilities produced a complex energy pattern that seemed to pulse with its own intelligence. "What is that?" Zara asked, her mental voice filled with excitement. David stared at the swirling energy in his hands. It looked like a small galaxy made of golden light, spinning slowly and casting warm shadows on the desert ground. "I don't know. I was thinking about protecting people, about wanting to heal the damage the void wraiths have caused, and this just appeared." Zara's eyes widened as she studied the energy pattern. "This is something completely new. It's not pure Zephyrian technology or human emotion. It's both, working together in perfect harmony." She pulled out a device that looked like a crystal tablet and began recording the energy readings. "David, I think you may have just created the first weapon that could actually hurt the void wraiths." But their celebration was cut short by an urgent alarm from Zara's ship. The crystal walls flashed red, and Zara's face went pale with fear. "What's happening?" David asked. "Long-range sensors have detected a void wraith scout ship entering your solar system," Zara replied, her voice tight with worry. "They must have been drawn by the energy signature of your awakening abilities." David felt his stomach drop. "Are they coming here? To Earth?" "Yes. And if they succeed in establishing a foothold in this system, they will call for reinforcements. Your entire world could be consumed within days." The golden energy pattern in David's hands flickered and grew brighter, responding to his rising emotions. Fear, anger, and determination mixed together, making the light pulse like a heartbeat. "Then we stop them," David said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "Whatever it takes." Zara looked at him with something like pride. "The scout ship will arrive in approximately 4 hours. It will likely land somewhere isolated to avoid detection while it studies your planet's defenses." "Can your ship fight?" "It? Normally, no. Void Wraith technology is designed to drain energy from our weapons and turn it against us, but your hybrid abilities might be different enough to surprise them." David closed his eyes and felt the energy flowing through his body, stronger now than ever before. When he opened them again, he saw Zara watching him with hope and fear mixed together in her luminous eyes. "Guess it's time to find out what I'm really capable of," David said. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of Earth, but whether the prophecy of the hybrid heir would prove true or false. As Zara's ship rose silently into the night, sky with David aboard, he realized there was no turning back now. His ordinary life was officially over. The real test was about to begin. Flying through space in Zara's ship was nothing like David had imagined. There was no rumbling engines or violent shaking like in movies. Instead, they glided smoothly through the atmosphere and into the darkness beyond Earth, as quiet as a whisper. Through the transparent walls, David watched his home planet shrink below them until it looked like a blue marble against the black void. "There," Zara said, pointing to a section of space that looked empty to David's normal vision. "Can you see it?" David focused the way Zara had taught him, letting his hybrid abilities enhance his sight. Slowly, a dark shape became visible against the stars. The Void Wraith scout ship looked like a piece of space itself had turned hungry and alive. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it, creating a hole in the star field that hurt to look at directly. "It's already scanning Earth's energy signatures," Zara explained, her mental voice tense. "Once it finishes its report, the main fleet will know exactly how to attack your world." David felt the golden energy pattern stirring in his chest, responding to his emotions. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less." The scout ship must have detected their approach because it suddenly changed direction, moving toward them with impossible speed. David got his first clear look at Void Wraith technology, and it made his skin crawl. The ship seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow, parts of it constantly breaking apart and reforming in new configurations. "Remember," Zara said as they prepared for contact, "your abilities are completely unknown to them. That gives us one advantage, but only if we use it wisely." The Void Wraith ship fired first, sending waves of dark energy that would have torn through normal matter like paper. But David instinctively raised his hands, and the golden light pattern expanded around Zara's ship like a protective bubble. When the dark energy hit his shield, something amazing happened. Instead of being destroyed or absorbed, the attack was transformed, turning from destructive darkness into harmless sparkles of light. "Impossible," Zara whispered. "Your energy is actually healing the damage they try to cause." David felt a surge of confidence. Maybe he really could do this. Maybe the prophecy was right after all. But the Void Wraith wasn't finished. The scout ship began to change shape, growing larger and sprouting what looked like weapons made of pure shadow. "It's calling for backup," Zara warned. "I'm detecting dimensional rifts opening nearby." Through the ship's sensors, David could see tears in space itself beginning to form. More Void Wraith ships were trying to push through from whatever dark dimension they called home. If even one more made it through, Earth would be doomed. David closed his eyes and reached deep inside himself, feeling for that place where his human heart met his Zephyrian heritage. The golden energy responded, flowing through him like a river of liquid starlight. When he opened his eyes, his vision had changed completely. He could see the dimensional rifts as clearly as doorways, and more importantly, he could see how to close them. The Void Wraiths used pain and destruction to tear holes in reality, but David realized he could use the opposite. Hope, love, the desire to protect and heal. These emotions had power the enemy couldn't understand or counter. "Zara, get us closer to the dimensional rifts," David said. "I think I know how to stop this." As they approached the largest rift, David extended his consciousness outward, feeling for the edges of the tear in space. The Void Wraiths had created it through pure destructive force. But David began to heal it the same way he might heal a wound. He thought about Earth, about all the people sleeping peacefully below, unaware that their world had almost been invaded. He thought about his co-workers, his neighbors, even strangers he had never met. He wanted to protect them all. The golden energy poured out of him in waves, washing over the dimensional rifts and sealing them shut one by one. The Void Wraith ships that were trying to come through found their pathways blocked, cut off from this reality by walls of pure healing energy. But the scout ship wasn't giving up. It launched itself directly at David and Zara, trying to destroy them before they could completely seal the rifts. David saw it coming and made a split-second decision that surprised even him. Instead of creating a shield or trying to dodge, David reached out with his abilities and grabbed the Void Wraith ship with tendrils of golden light. The contact should have been impossible. Void Wraiths fed on energy, consuming everything they touched. But David's hybrid nature worked differently. Where his energy touched the shadow ship, something incredible happened. The destructive darkness began to change, transforming into something else entirely. David realized he wasn't just protecting against the Void Wraiths, he was actually healing them, turning them back into the life forms they had been before. Hunger and destruction consumed them. The scout ship stopped attacking and began to glow with soft white light. Through his connection, David could sense confusion, then wonder, then something like gratitude from the being inside. It had been trapped in darkness for so long that it had forgotten what light felt like. "The rifts are sealed," Zara reported, amazement clear in her mental voice. "And the scout ship? David, what did you do to it?" "I think I reminded it how to be alive instead of just hungry," David replied, watching as the transformed ship began to drift peacefully away from Earth over. The next hour, David worked with Zara to send a message through the closed dimensional rifts. Using his unique abilities as a translator, they communicated with the Void Wraith fleet on the other side. David showed them what he had discovered, that their endless hunger could be satisfied not by consuming life, but by remembering how to create it. It would take time for the message to spread through their entire civilization. Some Void Wraiths might choose to remain as destroyers. But David had given them an alternative, a way back to the light they had lost eons ago. As Zara's ship returned to Earth's atmosphere, David looked down at his home planet with new eyes. He was no longer just a computer programmer who liked stargazing. He was the bridge between worlds, the heir who could bring peace between species that had been enemies for millennia. "What happens now?" David asked, as they landed back in the familiar desert clearing. "Now you choose," Zara replied. "You can return to your old life, knowing that Earth is safe. Or you can come with me and help heal the wounds that the Void Wraiths have left across the galaxy. There are billions of people on thousands of worlds who need what you can offer." David looked at his camping gear, still scattered around his old telescope. That equipment represented his old life, simple and predictable. But when he looked up at the stars, he saw something different now. He saw home, not just on Earth, but among the countless worlds where people needed help and healing. "I choose both," David said finally. "I'll spend time on Earth living my life here and watching for any threats. But I'll also travel with you, learning about the galaxy and helping wherever I can." Zara smiled that sunrise smile. The perfect answer from the heir of two worlds. As the weeks passed, David developed a routine that would have seemed impossible just a month earlier. 3 days a week, he worked at his programming job, living as a normal human. But the other 4 days, he traveled the stars with Zara, using his abilities to heal damaged worlds and bring hope to species that had lost it. His co-workers never suspected that their quiet colleague spent his long weekends saving civilizations and bridging gaps between alien cultures. To them, David just seemed happier and more confident than before, like someone who had finally found his true purpose in life. And every night, whether he was on Earth or on some distant world, David would look up at the stars and remember the moment when an alien queen had knelt before him and changed his life forever. He was no longer searching for something among those distant lights. He had found his place among them,